Divine Rise, blessed be to your day. May it be everything that you require to create everything that you desire. Today, I'm trying not to move my hands, but this download, this channel came through, and I was like, I got to put it out. I have to honor the thought. I have to honor the thought. I was thinking about it. I was thinking about it as I was getting ready for my day, getting ready for the gym, getting ready for the day, getting ready to do the finals of the podcast and all that good shit. But Divine Rise, blessed be to your day. I have a question for you. I got a question for you. You may not be ready for the question, but the question must be asked in order for you to be able to let it sit in, and we didn't get that answer. You ready? You ready? So, over the last couple of last couple of lectures, podcast episodes, we've been getting deep into these emotional wounds. We've been getting deep into this healing process, this true aspects of getting into your shadow work and healing yourself. I made a post earlier today. In the post, this is what I said in the post. How many relationships / friendships cycles are you going to go through before you realize you can't look for love? You're looking to stay basically a fetish. The definition of fetish is an obsession. So you basically running around trying to be a magic bullet or the little cock ring with your eternal conflicts. I want you to think about that. I want you to let that set in your mind. I want you to let that resonate all day. Because today is the day that we invest into those changes. But I want you to really think about that. If before I got to the point of understanding frequencies, understanding where I'm at, understanding how to build, understanding how to grow, I always thought I had to work really, really, really hard on the external narrative to build an identity based on acceptance. So I used to be in this space with myself, wanting to build things based on acceptance. Got my tourmaline, so we way up there. But then I had to understand with myself that as long as I was building these identities, it was always based on basically masturbating the thought or masturbating for my identity based on my trauma. There were so many times I was in positions where I would almost unconsciously look for shit or unconsciously look for things just so I could masturbate with the thought. Get off on the feeling of something trying to test me. Putting myself in positions where me looking for something that I did not look for inside of myself just to get the feeling, to feel good, to feel accepted, to feel not neglected, to feel not rejected. That was a lot of the times with the energy that was the energy that I was in. I didn't want to feel rejected. I didn't want to feel neglect. So all of these things that we like to use are basically, we create these identities and we become obsessions. Your obsession, that fetish, that obsession, that addiction to stay in this same space, to not do this growth. It's all based on you trying to remain for who? You'll do all of this work externally to build yourself up just to go get something, just to bring it around individuals. Remember, because what you see, what you interact with, you're on that frequency. So when I really thought about that, it made no sense for me to go try to go get all the cars that I had, all the clothes that I got, all the shoes that I was grabbing, all the things that I was trying to get without becoming what I needed to do to radiate at that level. I was stuck within my courage or my identity or my pride. I never got past that point of neutrality. So I caught myself always in this state of neutrality. We don't get into that at the end. But I want to get into this piece first. But if I didn't understand that first, everything around me is based on my unseen or things that I've not dealt with. That means when it came time to do the work, when it came time to learn myself, when it came time to really do this internal work, I would masturbate with the thought. So what was I using as my lubrication? What was I using as the lubrication? My trauma, my fetish. That was my fetish. A lot of us go into our spaces not realizing that when we're in search for something that we have not yet found inside of ourselves, everything outside of you basically is a fetish. That relationship that you're trying to mend based on this thought that if I do this, this, and this, I'll be able to create something or get something from it, and you become obsessed with trying to remain in that behavior, you're stuck in a fetish. It's just a fetish. You got a fetish going on in your mind. Use the same example. If you go to Pornhub right now, multiple categories for every type of fetish. You go on the internet right now, hit Google right now. There's multiple categories for everything in your life. For everything that can tickle your fancy or keep that thought. Keep you feeling good about what's really an insecurity, what's really a wound. Something you ain't even dealing with. You keep using when you coinciding, I've talked about it last week. When you're coinciding with your traumas, one of the key things to know how you're coinciding with your trauma is you can't give anything a reason other than the identity that it has or the title that it has. I was watching a TikTok video, and it was talking about the blood is thicker than water. Everybody misuses that quote. And when I went and looked up the quote earlier, then I saw that video because I wrote down some notes for that and put it to for the podcast. I thought about it. I was like, blood is thicker than water than the bonds of the womb. I'm just paraphrasing it. Blood is thicker than water but the true full of it is blood is thicker than the water of the womb, which means the bonds you make, the covenants, like when you think about blood, think like you making that covenant, that blood, your blood that you putting into things, that means the things that you consciously create in your space that you say this is based on connection are greater than the things that you were born into. That means every event that you went through, that you coincided with, you keep using that water, using your trauma as that lubrication to keep you in that space so you can keep doing what you're doing, that obsession. All you're doing is living through your fetish. I was trying to be this goes down to everything that you tap in. This goes into everything that you're trying to do. Think about it. I didn't realize that when I went between 2003 and 2005, 2003, 4, 5, 6, to about 2007, when I was going for my psychology stuff, I just wanted a title based on my identity. The title that you trying to carry. That, I got this certification. Bobby Hemmett said that shit the best. Your job becomes your culture if you don't understand yourself. So the title that I was trying to get, I wanted to be a millionaire, even though I didn't understand what a fucking millionaire was. I just kept stroking it with the fetish of my trauma being the lube. I never want to go back to being that anymore. I got to prove my mother wrong. I got to prove my pops wrong. So that's what I was doing. Even when it came to my jobs. And I've told y'all that if you have not tuned into the lectures, I've said that in many stories of my lectures where all of my jobs lasted 5 years. 5 is the number right before you step into that creation aspect when you look at numerology. So I always wonder why all my jobs only lasted the 5 years. Why all my jobs always lasted the 5 years. Yeah, I would go back to a certain job, but it only last 5 years. Because I was in a position, I was still trying to stroke my ego. Or I was still trying to stroke the ego or the shadow of my pops. Not knowing the shit that he been through to get to the point he was at. I was still trying to stroke the ego of my mother, not knowing the shit that she had been through. And I've talked about it before. You only can pull from one space. You only gonna pull from one space. Even if you looking back at what your mother did that you didn't like. And now you're going against everything your mother ever did. You're gonna go full circle and start doing the things. And you being active in doing and being active on one side of that spectrum, you have to pull the other spectrum to bring balance. So the things that you're actively doing to go against your mother. My mother never worked a day in her life, so I said I never wanted to be in that position. So I'm working every day actively. But when it came to me really taking care of the things I needed to take care of, to really sit down with myself, didn't do it. I was always too tired because I was putting too much strain on one side of my polarity. I was stroking on one side. I was masturbating with the thought on one side. I was obsessed with going into this space on one side. So when everything else came up on the other side that coincided with my traumas and the events that I wasn't dealing with, didn't know how to deal with it. Didn't want to face it. Didn't want to have the conversation. I kept them stuck in those identities. So I kept doing things based on the blood is thicker than water. But I didn't look at even for myself, I didn't look at the other half of the phrase. Blood is thicker than the water of the womb. That means the shit that I was born into, the shit that birthed me into the space that I came into, that was my decision. I have to deal with those things. You're supposed to grow. Remember, you're supposed to grow. You can't stay in the womb forever. This is the womb mentality. This is the neutrality that we stay in. So many times, I remember so many times going through so many ego deaths until I realized I was in a state of neutrality. Whenever, and we don't get deep into it throughout the week, but I made a post with that cone. We're getting into that cone of the emotions. When you look at the bottom, it's fear. The fear is at the bottom. Enlightenment, love, the joy is at the top. Right before you get to the realm of neutrality, that means you're coming into the space of being in a space where you can now be aware and assess. Right below that is courage and pride. Courage and pride. Pride is the identity. Courage is the energy that's using you to keep you under, because that's why courage is above it. And the courage is what you're speaking through. So you have that conversation based on that identity. Ain't nobody going to check me. But everybody keeps checking you. When are you going to sit back and be like, it's time for me to check myself? It's time for me to... Everybody keep thinking all these different things about me. Nobody can think anything about you. It's their perception based on what their frequency that they're on. So if you are being triggered by other events in your life, by those events and those aspects in your life, and you keep getting triggered by it, it's pushing you out of your comfort zone. It's pushing you out of everything that you've ever known. Ever since I was like 16, I remember every time anybody met my mother, met my parents, met my sisters, met my brothers, based on what happened because me meeting my father when I was 12, I told everybody I was adopted. I didn't understand the inherent understanding of such saying that, because after I started understanding soul contracts, karmic debt, the family debts, the karmic cycles, the things that I had to come down here and work on, that we coming down here to work on, nigga, I was adopted. I was adopted. It only related based on the trauma, the events that I wasn't dealing with, the things that I wasn't dealing with. So my space, my badlands, was created to match where I was at. This happens a lot of times when we get started, because, yeah, we're going to pause on that. This week on the God Hour podcast, we're going to get deeper into this aspect. You know, on Friday night, we're going to get deep, even deeper. This Tuesday, 6 a.m., I dropped a new episode, Neutrality. Understanding that we get to a point of neutrality. Neutrality is different than peace. Neutrality is different than peace. Neutrality, the best analogy I can use is, you ever seen the pictures of the memes when Shorty's taking a picture in front of her top ramen bed or in front of piles of trash and saying adult life is hard? That's neutrality. That's a level of acceptance and not taking on either end of your spectrum, not seeing what you need to understand and taking in sight of your accountability and responsibility. True peace is when I look back at the trash that's sitting on the floor, the shit that's sitting around me, and I actually go through the process of pulling out what I need to pull out. I go through the process of the rejection wound or the thoughts, the perceptions of me cleaning up my life and me throwing out piles and taking it out no matter what. That's how I get to that peace. That's how I readjust my opportunity. A lot of times we get into this space with ourselves where we trying to create, we're wanting something more. The first video that I posted in my story, Kevin Gates said this. Others see a gift, even if they unconsciously do not see the gift that is within you, they see that light that is within you. That's why they're attracted to you. Remember, moths are attracted to the flame. They're attracted to the light. Individuals see that light that's within you because you've used it in so many times unconsciously in order to rally the troops and get everybody together. But when you're using it from that sense of you not doing the healing aspect, basically you're a magic bullet or you're a cock ring trying to keep everybody hard, trying to keep everybody pleasure, keeping everybody okay. But if you stay around in that space and you're not actively cultivating and healing, doing this internal work, everybody around you, yeah, you may get some streams of thought. You may get some good ideas because you get ideas from everywhere. But that key is, guess what? That key, one thing that I had to learn, because I was getting all types of good information from everybody around me. They would always give me some good information like how to make money or doing this or doing this, but they couldn't give me no examples. So instead of me wondering, the external wanting to be accepted, I started taking that information and I started taking more time to myself. This is when I started understanding we get into the zodiacs on Friday. Understanding my zodiac. I'm going to give you an example. I'm an Aquarius sun and a Scorpio rising. That means, and I'll tell you what Scorpio rising means. I'm the Judas kissing the old paradigms of myself on the cheek. But I was an Aquarius. I was an Aquarius. I'm standing by that. I was an Aquarius. So in that aspect, all of your zodiacs control everything in your humanity and understanding the balances in that space. So until I understood that, this is an example, until I understood that one of the main characteristics of a Aquarius is detachment and disassociation, disconnect, detach. So I created a world based on, I'm an Aquarius. So I created through my identity, my ego, my instincts, created a world, my super ego or my environment of something that I always stay detached from. But this is how I learned it. I'm learning something. So when I really started using that to my advantage, because at first I was just using it to the disadvantage of not growing. Now when I use it to my advantage, I would get that information from people. People would tell me like, yo, you looked into this, or you looked into like stocks, or you looked into like flipping houses, or you looked this simple shit like that nature. You looked into going to school, all that. I'm like, yeah. I get the information, leave everything else on the table. I took what I needed, took everything else at the table, and I actively searched. That means I actively, when I didn't have a laptop, didn't have a reliable smartphone, library, sitting in there in the computer room. Nigga beside me looking at his Facebook, somebody else over here looking at some other iffy stuff we're not going to get into. But then I started taking the information and working with it, learning from it, building on it. Because you get this information, you're always in the right position. What are you doing with it? So I started doing that. So as I started doing this process, take this information, come into my space, learn, tinker with it. The first thing that would normally come up was things that I wasn't trying to deal with. Like, oh, you need to get this or you need to get this. And then it'd be like the normal shit. It'd be like, oh man, damn, I need a license to do this. Or I need to do this. So, oh shit, I need a license to take this trip or go on the road. I need a license to go on the road. Okay, cool. So now I was faced with the things that I already knew that I had to do. I was already faced with the work that I already had to do. I only could avoid it for so long. That feeling of that fetish or that obsession only lasted for so long. That thrill of somebody, me masturbating with the thought and my trauma being a lube only lasted for so long. This is when we get into those urges. It only lasted for so long. Because after that, I was just irritated. Like, you think about, like, whenever they show you in, like, movies when the dude say he get his and roll over. Or shorty, she thinking like a man, so she roll over afterwards. That's what you keep doing with your life. You get a little bit of excitement. You get that excitement. It burns out because the emotions that took you into that space, you're now feeling happy. You're now feeling what you think is the opposite. So the endorphin or the dopamine is released until you need your next fix. So you never step out of the neutrality. Neutrality is the space of assessment. Neutrality is that space of assessment. So many times we come to that space of neutrality, that space of time to assess. But it's our pride and our courage right under it. The pride being those identities and the courage being the trauma, you masking the trauma, masking the event that stops you from actually being honest with yourself. There's no more running. She's the track star. There's no more running. You have to face it. A lot of y'all in your life right now, y'all got shit going on that's fucking fun, that's beyond crazy, and it's pushing you outside of your comfort zone. It's pushing you outside of your comfort zone. Allow it to push you. Allow it to push you. Because I remember I told you about last week, your intuition's always going to challenge you. Your intuition's always going to challenge your instinct. It's time to get your instincts in order. You had that survival instinct, but you want to have peace. That means you got to raise your instincts into the levels of peace. That means where your intuition challenges you to learn peace. When you master that, your intuition rises into that peace category. It rises above it's in the realm of neutrality. So now everything that comes into that space, and we'll get deep into this on Friday, everything that comes into that space will naturally be purified by the neutrality or the balance of your energy. It's time to do that work. It's time to stop. I don't want to do it. Because all you're doing is hurting yourself. I told you last week, broke it down last week. You've not been competing with anybody else but yourself. You've been competing with your traumas. You going into spaces and every time you have an argument, it's your inner child that's having an argument. It's two children and they're arguing. You ever notice when you listen to somebody have an argument and they start sounding really, really childish? Because it's not the adult speaking, it's the inner child speaking. It's the inner child arguing in that space. It's the hurt of the inner child. Remember, the anger don't come from nowhere. The sadness don't come from nowhere. The doubt don't come from nowhere. It ain't no coincidence. Anything in that space is just the reflection to show you what's next for you to tap into. What you about to do? You want to keep repeating? By all means. Have some, have not. Or you want to go forward. If somebody had told me, if it was meant for me, I'm going to say it like this. If it was meant for me to tap in 7 years ago, I'll say about 8 years ago. Because I remember I was looking at the Bobby Hemmett lectures. And some of this was in 2003, 2004 in New York. And I was in NYU University at the time this nigga was doing them lectures. So it made me think about my streams of thought. What if that one time where the building was where they were having it, instead of me going over to the pool spot or me going over to that restaurant, what if I accidentally walked into that building? Where would I be at now? One more little key. As you heal, as you do your internal work, you initiate the Mandela effect. I gave you a example of that in two Fridays ago when I was like, I was so distraught when my pops called me Lucifer for the first time. And then when I went and did that meditation, after I got the information of who Lucifer was, the energy was, and I had that conversation with my inner child, I was like, he's calling you what you are, but he's saying it from a space of his own hurt. Gave that conversation to my inner child. Opened up every other gateway. Because right after that, couple months after that, had a conversation with my pops about why he was hurting. That's that Mandela effect. It's time for you to grow. It's time for you to step out of this space of neutrality thinking that that's peace. Remember, your peace will keep you in a state of observation. Neutrality, coinciding with your trauma, I always feel like you got to prove it to somebody. I ain't got to prove shit to nobody. You ain't got to prove shit to nobody once you know where you at. Once you know your authentic self. That shit shine through automatically. If they're not on the frequency, if you can't see them, then if you see it, you on that frequency. Time to assess yourself. I desire you to be the best. I want you to be the best because I reflect from that transformative space in that learning and our growth. In order for us to grow, we must question everything. Allow everything to come on the table. Taking away what we truly need from the path of our heart. It's time to stop living in that world of the fetish. Stop living in the fetish. Stop using your traumas as a lubrication to keep you where you at. Stop saying that because I went through this, and this, and that's why I got all these degrees. You just trying to dress up the fetish. You out here trying to pretty women it. That's for if you're a man or a woman. You out here trying to pretty women it. For the men, you out here trying to be Deuce Bigelow, male gigolo. Stop dressing up your traumas. Let's start dealing with them. That's what I'm here for. That's the vessel. That's my purpose. It's one of my many purposes. Everything from consultations to readings. All my readings are mini consultations. Natal Chart analysis, human design. The class is coming soon. The class will be in August. I'm launch that class. Start launching more classes in August. I got other stuff we got on the table. But your space is your opportunity. You're always in the right position. What are you doing with it? Y'all stay tuned. Y'all gonna get the God Hour podcast 6 a.m. East Standard Time on Tuesday. I love you. We love us. Ashe.